Opening a clinic in 9 Dragon Street was a horrible idea. People in Kensington would head to Medical Street to see a doctor. Those who traveled to Kensington from outside came because of Medical Street's reputation, and they would not go to ordinary small clinics. Common Clinic's door was half open. James heard a woman's voice from outside the clinic. "What the FCK is going on?" His expression immediately changed. He did not rush to the clinic but instead eavesdropped from outside the door. Inside the clinic, Henry was sitting on a chair with a woman across him. The woman seemed to be around 25 to 26 years old. She was decent with some makeup on and in a beautiful dress. "You're Henry, right? I don't think we're suitable for each other. You don't have a car or savings, and your lousy clinic doesn't even have any customers. My requirements for a boyfriend are really high. He has to have at least an apartment in the city, a car worth at least $500,000, and also savings of $1 million. The woman picked up her bag and glanced contemptuously at Henry, who was sitting idly like a piece of wood. "Broke SS. What's the point of a blind date if you don't have money?" She left behind a word and walked out with her hips swinging side to side. Ads by Pub Future. Henry wanted to stop her, but he did not manage to find the right words. He sighed. After the woman left, James walked in with a smile. He bent over from laughing too hard and patted the table with his hands. "Are you serious, Henry? Why didn't you choose a more romantic place for a blind date? How could you have it in Common Clinic?" "I'm going to die from laughter." Henry was so embarrassed. James, when did you arrive?" "I've been here for a while. I heard everything." "Haha. She said you had no money, car, or saving and even called you a broke SS." James seemed to have heard the funniest joke of his life and could not stop laughing and almost cried from laughing so hard. "That's enough. Stop making fun of me," Henry said with a depressed expression. James covered his mouth. He did not want to laugh but could not help himself. The famous general, Black Shadow of the Southern Plains, had a blind date and was called a broke SS. Ahem. After laughing, James straightened his body and patted Henry on the shoulder. "Tell me honestly, what kind of women do you like? I'll introduce you to some women." I was just bored. I downloaded a blind date app and randomly asked to meet up with a girl. I'm not really interested in dating since I don't think I'm suitable for dating either. Henry explained honestly. James smiled and said, "I know, I understand. You've held it in for too long. You are over 30 yet still a virgin. It's alright. I'll take care of you and make sure you have your first night." TSK. Henry looked disdainfully and said, "Aren't you the same? Do you think I've not heard about the rumors going outside? It's rumored that you haven't slept with Thea." Cough. James blushed and refuted, "Who said so? I will sleep with her tonight and have a big fat baby next year." "Then it still means you haven't. How dare you make fun of me when you're not much better?" Henry looked at him disdainfully. "Let's not talk about this topic anymore. You are also at the age already. I'll bring you out and enjoy the night tonight. Wait, let me make a call and ask if there are any entertainment venues in Kensington. We should go and look around." "Are you serious, James? Are we really going? Just to look around and experience life?" James made the phone call. He directly called Alex. In fact, he was not interested in such things, but he wanted to take care of his subordinate. Henry was also a man and had needs that needed to be satisfied. He wanted to help him become a real man. Meanwhile, he would do it with Thea tonight. He could not help but get excited at the thought. "I'll have to head back early tonight." "Alex, it's me, James. I need to ask you if you know of any entertainment venues in Kensington. I'm asking for a friend." After inquiring with Alex, James hung up the phone, glanced at the puzzled Henry, and said with a smile, "Why you spacing out? I've already inquired about the best place. Go have a look. I've made arrangements for you. I have to go back home early." Henry drove his modified Tesla and left the 9 Dragon Street with James. Where are we going, James? The urban area, a place called Great Dignity on Mount Street. Okay, replied Henry. Then, he concentrated on driving. Actually, Michelle is a pretty decent person. I read about her background information. She graduated from a famous university and is currently the manager of a large enterprise with a salary of about $30,000 per month. Understandably, she had higher requirements for her partner. Henry could not help but explain. Are we talking about the Michelle that called you a broke ass? James glanced at Henry. Yeah, her full name is Michelle Yeager. Henry nodded. Forget about a woman like her. I'll ask Scarlett to introduce you to a better woman than her. By the way, you can work in the transgenerational group if you want to. You can take on the position of vice president in name and would be able to pick up girls much easier. No, it won't be you picking up girls. The girls will be picking you up. James said with a smile. Forget it, forget it. I'm not suited to be a vice president, Henry immediately refused. It's just in name. You can just go in and supervise some work every day. Also, I heard plenty of beautiful women are in the entertainment industry. How about you buy an entertainment company that has plenty of gorgeous celebrities? There are still 100 million on the card. Everything will be settled. Henry smiled and said nothing. He simply thought that James made sense. He was already at a suitable age to start a family and business. He was just messing around and downloaded a blind date application for fun. Ads by Pub Future. He never thought about picking up girls or anything. Soon, they arrived at Great Dignity. It was a very extremely high-end clubhouse and was membership-based. Henry parked the car, and the two walked to the entrance. They glanced at the security guards at the door, and the women dressed beautifully, showing their curves while walking in and out of the venue. Henry suddenly felt a bit timid at that moment. He was the general of the Southern Plains and had seen all sorts of crazy things. However, he was nervous now. How about we just forget it, James? Henry glanced at James. We're already here, so let's just go in and take a look. We're not short of money anyway. Just take it as an opportunity to look around a bit. We'd be back on the battlefield fighting again if an emergency declaration was issued from the higher-ups. Yo, James. A voice sounded unexpectedly. Henry heard the voice and turned around. His expression changed drastically upon seeing the person. The person in front of him was Michelle, who had just been on a blind date with him. It had not been long, but she had already changed her clothes and come to great dignity. At this moment, Michelle did not look like the same person from the blind date. Previously, although she wore a gorgeous dress, it was relatively conservative. Her current outfit was extremely revealing and almost as if she rather walked around without clothes. Michelle was dressed in a thin and sexy dress. She approached Henry, who was standing at Great Dignity's entrance. Henry was thrilled, and he smiled. What happened? My words hurt you, so you came to have fun in Great Dignity. This is a membership-based club. You won't be able to get in without a member. She squinted her eyes and scanned Henry from top to bottom. Your whole outfit isn't even worth $100. While speaking, she pointed at Great Dignity's signboard and sneered, do you see those big words? They're inlaid with gold. The minimum spending here is $180,000 each visit. Henry did not expect to meet the woman from the previous blind date, Michelle. Didn't it say she works as a manager of a high-end company in her documents? Do you work here, Michelle? Yeah, it's a part-time job. Do you have a problem? Michelle was not embarrassed at all. I am indeed a manager, but is it wrong for me to work part-time here? Do you know how much it is for my service? It's $38,000. Are you rich? I'll accompany you for some drinks if you can spend a few $100,000. Michelle had mocked Henry from the beginning to the end. However, you don't have money, right? Since you don't have money, you shouldn't come to such places to pretend to be rich. Get lost. She finished speaking and turned to leave, walking into great dignity while twisting her waist. James wanted to laugh but kept suppressing it. He finally burst out laughing after Michelle walked into great dignity. Henry, I don't know what to say about you anymore. A manager. I'm going to die laughing. Henry flushed red. That's enough. Let's just go back, James. Why should we go back when we're already here? At least go inside and have a look around. James took out his phone and was about to phone Alex. When he called Alex to inquire about a place, Alex had told him to wait for him to arrive after giving a location. Suddenly, a Rolls-Royce approached quickly and pulled up. A bald man in his 50s with a slightly chubby figure rushed over in a hurry. He approached James and gasped, I'm sorry. There was a bit of a traffic jam on the way, so I'm a bit late. It's alright. We just arrived. We're mainly here for Henry today. This is Black Shadow from the Southern Plains. You have to help take care of him well tonight, Alex. You know the consequences if the General Black Shadow gets angry if you're neglectful with the service tonight, right? I'll ensure you'll be satisfied with the arrangements tonight. Please head this way. Alex gestured for them to enter. He personally led James and Henry into great dignity. Great dignity, a luxurious private room. A sexy and beautiful woman knelt on the ground. Mr. Yates. The woman knelt on the ground and was very respectful. Alex ordered, get all the prettiest girls to come here. Understood. The woman immediately got up to make arrangements. Ads by Pub Future. Soon, 20 or so beautifully dressed women entered the private room. These women were from the age of 18 to 25 years old. Some were sexy, some pure, some cute, and some very charismatic. There were all kinds of women among them. 20+ women knelt on the ground and waited to be picked. Alex glanced at James and Alex, asking with a smile, do you see any to your liking? James gave Henry a push and asked, you like any of them? Henry swallowed his saliva as he looked at all the sexy women kneeling on the ground. He had been through all sorts of situations but was nervous at the current moment. His mouth became increasingly dry. Henry did not reply. Next. Great dignity can wait to be shut down if these two are unsatisfied tonight. Alex stood up and rebuked them. The manager kneeling on the side trembled in fear. She immediately led the first batch out and brought in a new group. There were more than 30 women this time. They were all beautiful women. Long legs, pale skin, and big breasts. Even Michelle, who had mocked Henry previously, was there. However, she did not dare to raise her head and kept kneeling on the ground after entering the private room. What do you think about them? Alex stood in front of Henry and sweated nervously. James, let's just forget it, Henry glanced at James and said. Meanwhile, James was picking out a woman for Henry. He was thrilled to see Michelle. You. Raise your head. Those who were kneeling did not know who was being called. The manager on the side immediately shouted, Number 8. Raise your head. Hearing this, Michelle raised her head. She looked up to see James and Henry sitting on the sofa in front of her. Boom. Her mind seemed to have exploded in that instance. What's going on here? She did not respond for a while. Henry also saw Michelle. He also felt embarrassed by the situation. The blind date flopped, and now they had to meet on such a strange occasion. That's it. You will do. James patted his thigh with one hand and pointed at Michelle. This one, she'll do. He smiled happily. He laughed and almost had tears fall from his eyes. James laughed heartlessly. Henry was so embarrassed. Alex sighed in relief. James was finally satisfied. Michelle was still stunned and had not grasped the situation. Isn't he poor? He has no money, car, or savings. How does he know the famous Alex of Kensington? Do you have anything else I could help with? The managing kneeling asked cautiously. We want all of them except this one, that one, and her. James pointed at a few women and spoke. You and you. Leave quickly. The others stay behind and serve our honored guest well. Understood. Those who were named left quickly. The rest stood up and walked toward the three of them. I don't need servicing. You all go ahead and serve those two. James stood up immediately. I also don't need the service. Please serve this guest well, Alex also hurriedly said. All the women surrounded Henry. In an instant, there were a few lipstick stains on Henry's face. Meanwhile, Michelle was still stunned. So many. A dozen of us. How much does it cost? Ads by Pub Future. The cheapest one is $38,000, not including drinks. Wouldn't it cost at least several million dollars for the whole night? Isn't he a broke SS? How does he have so much money? Michelle was confused. Henry was embarrassed to be surrounded by so many women and avoided them. He hurriedly shouted, all right, I don't need that many. He rushed to James, panicked, and said, James, this is enough. I've experienced enough. Let's go back now. Just go and have fun. James pushed him over and pressed him on the sofa. He turned around and glanced at Michelle, who was still shocked by the situation. He said teasingly, what are you still doing there? Why aren't you serving your honorable guest? Oh, Michelle finally came to her senses and sat beside Henry. However, she was immediately pulled away by a long-legged woman. Many of these women knew Alex. A man who he highly respected was surely someone with a strong background. They would surely have a lot of benefits if they pleased him. The women scrambled over to him to serve him. You have fun, Henry. I'll head back first, James said with a smile. Then, he glanced toward Alex. Celestial Group can wait to be shut down if Henry leaves today, he threatened. Understood. Alex nodded repeatedly. James left behind a few words and left. James. Henry shouted out for James. However, James had already left through the door. Henry looked helpless. What's with all this? Have a drink, Master. Master, tell us about your work. Master, don't hold back. You should not be so restrained in such a place. These women all had serious jobs as executives or managers in major companies. They were all here to work part-time. All of them were very seductive. The same was true for Michelle. At this moment, she was trying her best to seduce and please Henry. Ugh, why are you all surrounding me? He is the big boss here. Go and please him. Henry pointed at Alex. Immediately, a few of the women walked over to Alex. James left. He did not care about what happened after leaving. Instead of returning to Thea's house immediately, he went to solve some stuff. It was about Yosef. That B-starred Yosef received bribes from Howard to frame Thea. He had looked for him once in the past. However, he refused to tell the truth in front of Lex and instead pointed the finger at them, wronging Thea again. James had sworn never to let Thea be wronged again in this life. What was the point of having a scumbag like him around anymore? Blight King, please notify the Commercial Crime Investigation Department to help me catch someone. The Blight King was stunned for a moment after receiving the call from James. He wondered if James had finally decided to change. Instead of using his fists to solve a problem, he was finally resorting to legal means. However, it was a good thing since he would not have to keep clean up after James' mess. Where is he? I'll send someone over right away. James informed him of Yosef's address. All right, I will make arrangements now. James hung up the phone and took a taxi to Yosef's place. It was already afternoon. Yosef was afraid that James would come to him for revenge. Thus, he asked his son Charlie Zaborowski to get a few friends over at his house. He wanted to ensure that James would be beaten until even his mother did not recognize him if he dared to show up at their house. Yosef's house. Come, my friends, have a drink. Yosef's son, Charlie, greeted his strong and muscular friends. The group of people drank beer and ate barbecued meat. A man in his 20s wearing a black singlet said confidently, "Don't worry, Charlie. I'll break that live-in son-in-law James' legs if he walks through the door." I'm reassured that Nick is here today. I promise to give you the $30,000 after you teach that brat a lesson. Nothing less than that, so you can go have drinks with your friends. Charlie smiled and was relieved to have his friends present. Here comes the beer. Yusuf walked in with another carton of beer. Knock, knock, knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The noisy living room instantly became silent, and everyone's eyes focused on the door. I'll go take a look, Charlie stood up and said. He walked to the door. He saw a man standing outside after opening the door. He immediately laughed cheerfully after seeing the person outside. Haha, James, you really came. I've been waiting for you. Oh, ads by Pub Future. James glanced at Charlie standing at the door. 25 to 26 years old, dressed in a singlet and has a blue dragon tattooed on his body. You were waiting for me. Come here, my friends. Charlie turned around and called for his friends. The people in the room immediately picked up the iron pipe on the ground and walked out fiercely. 7 or 8 people with weapons stood at the door and glanced at James mockingly. Yusuf also came over to the door, and his face darkened when he saw James. He sneered, James, you probably never expected me to be on guard, waiting for you to show up. I've specifically called some friends to wait for you at home. Let me introduce you. This is Nick, who is from the underworld. So you've been prepared. James smiled slightly. His fearless reaction made Charlie immensely displeased. He did not kneel and beg for mercy despite seeing so many people attack him, Nick. However, James suddenly moved, raised his foot, and swung it at Charlie. Charlie was kicked right in the chest. Immediately, he flew backward and bumped into the many people behind him. James charged over quickly. Countless groans resounded throughout the house. Charlie and his friends were beaten to the ground. James sat on the sofa and crossed his legs with a cigarette in his hand. Yusuf stood beside with a pale face. Thud. He could not stand the aura from James, and he threw himself to the ground. Yusuf burst into tears and begged, James, I was forced to do it by Howard. He said I'll face a lawsuit if I didn't do as he said. I'll have to go to jail. Please, please forgive me. Jail. You are afraid of Howard but aren't afraid of me. James smiled and asked. Aye. Yusuf was unable to answer. Suddenly, several policemen showed up at the door. In the lead was the Blight King's subordinate, Daniel. Usually, the Blight King could settle things with one phone call, but since it was related to James, he sent Daniel just to be on the safe side. James. Daniel approached and greeted. James pointed at Yusuf and said, It's him. Bring him back. Daniel turned to the policeman behind him and said. Understood. Several policemen came forward and handcuffed Yusuf. James pointed at the people groaning on the ground in pain and said, Take them too and check if they have committed any crimes. Deal with them together if you find anything. Otherwise, just lock them up for a few days. What are you doing? Why you arresting me? Yusuf was cuffed but kept resisting and shouting. A policeman came forward, took out some documents, and showed them to Yusuf. The policeman said coldly, I am the head of the Commercial Crime Investigation Department. You're suspected of a white-collar crime. Please come with us to assist with the investigation. James instructed, by the way, investigate the Callahans too. However, keep a low profile and don't allow the public to find out. He did not want to let the Callahans off the hook so easily. Everyone who slandered Thea had to pay the price. Yusuf, Charlie, and 7 or 8 gangsters were taken away. James. Before the policeman left, he looked at James and asked respectfully, May I ask how would you like us to investigate the Callahans? This policeman was the head of the Commercial Crime Investigation Department. His name was Wayne Jackson. Before coming, he was aware of James' identity and knew he was the Callahan's son-in-law. However, he did not know of James' other identities. One thing he knew was that an ordinary person would not be treated respectfully by the Blight King's subordinate. He was not confident in how he was supposed to investigate the Callahans, so he inquired. After the investigations, those who deserve to go to jail should go to jail, and those who deserve to be fined should be fined, said James. Understood. Wayne nodded. I've troubled you again, General Highsmith. I'll treat you to dinner some other day. James waved his hand and turned to leave. Ads by Pub Future. At the same time, at the Clahans' villa. A few cars parked in front of the villa with some pickup trucks and a brand new limited edition Fira. Tommy saw the cars through the surveillance at the door and was taken aback but headed outside to check it out. After going out, he saw many people unloading goods from the pickup truck and carrying many boxes. Who are you people? He approached and asked. A middle-aged man dressed in a suit and tie, seemingly a very successful person, stepped forward and asked, Is this the Clahans' residence? Why yeah, why? Tommy was puzzled and did not understand what these people were doing. Nice to meet you, Mr. Tommy. We're here to send some betrothal gifts. Betrothal gifts. Tommy was shocked. Please come inside. Tommy immediately understood and invited the people into the house. After entering the house, Tommy shouted, Grandpa, there are some people here at the door with betrothal gifts. Huh? Lex was puzzled. The middle-aged man in the lead said, Mr. Yates had requested us to send it here. After informing them of the situation, he took out a list and read it, $88,800,000 in cash, a limited edition Fira worth $28 million, a 22,000 square meter villa in Goodview Villa District worth $380 million. Jewelry worth $58 million and clothes worth $80,800,000. After reciting the note, several people walked in with the boxes. The middle-aged man approached Lex dumbfounded and handed him the note while saying, Mr. Callahan, please check the gifts to see if there are any problems. Sign the delivery order if there are no problems. He turned around and ordered some people to open the boxes. The boxes contained brand new green bank notes, countless gold and silver jewelry, and some designer clothes. Lex was stunned. The whole family was shocked. Betrothal gift. Which man was interested in which woman of the Callahans? Who had sent the gifts? This. Lex glanced at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man said, There's a box of $88,800,000 in cash. There's a total of 10 boxes that contain the jewelry, clothes, villa key, and car keys. Everything is here. Excuse me, which woman from the Callahans is this for and which gentleman sent the gifts? Asked Lex. The middle-aged man said, I don't know about that. I'm only in charge of the delivery. Lex stiffly picked up the pen and signed the delivery order. Then the middle-aged man asked the team to leave. After the people left, Tommy immediately went to the box containing the money, took out the stack, and counted them. He scrutinized them and shouted, Grandpa, the money is real. Lex was still trying to figure out who was this Mr. Caden, and why he was so generous. Tommy put down the money and walked toward Lex. Then, he said, Grandpa, the only woman not married in the Callahans is Megan and Isabella from Uncle's side. However, Isabella already has a boyfriend, and he isn't named Caden either. Yeah, yes Mr. Caden didn't even state whose hand in marriage was he asking for and sent so many betrothal gifts. Lex nodded and said, It must be for me. I'm so much prettier than Isabella. This mysterious Mr. Caden is surely not interested in her. He is definitely asking for my hand in marriage, Megan exclaimed and reacted in excitement. Lex pondered for a while. Among the unmarried women of Callahans, Megan was the most outstanding one, and he also agreed that the gifts must have been for Megan. Still, who was this Mr. Caden? Megan, do you any rich man by the name of Mr. Caden? The only family that had the surname Caden was the one 10 years ago. There aren't any other families with the surname that could afford such lavish gifts. Lex glanced at Megan and asked. No. Megan fell into thought. She had no recollection of any rich man called Mr. Caden. The Callahans began to guess who the betrothal gift was for and the identity of the mysterious sender, Mr. Caden. Meanwhile, James, who was headed home, received a call from Scarlett. Ads by Pub Future. James, I've sent the betrothal gifts to the Callahans. Lex had personally received them. James frowned and said, Did you send them to the Callahans' villa? Why, yeah. Is something the matter? James scolded. Why did you send it to the Callahans' villa? I asked you to send it to Thea's house. Huh. Don't be angry, James. I'll send someone to take them back and redeliver them again immediately, Scarlett said hurriedly in panic. Forget it. I'll bring Thea to the Callahans' villa to claim them later, James thought to himself and said. James hung up the phone. Since it was sent to the Callahans' villa, so be it. Bringing Thea to receive the gifts would also make her proud. Moreover, the Commercial Crime Investigation Department had already intervened in Thea's matters and would be arresting Howard and the others very soon. Bringing Thea over would clear Thea's name. James was burning with excitement as he thought of Thea's charming face and the sight she was going to show him at night. Thea's house. Dad, Mom, someone sent a betrothal gift to the Callahans' villa. David, who was scrolling through his phone, suddenly shouted. He was chatting in the family group. Tommy shared pictures of valuable betrothal gifts. Mom, Dad, check the family group chat. Tommy said the gift included $88,800,000 in cash, a limited edition Fira worth $28 million, and a 22,000 square meter villa in Goodview Villa District worth $380 million. There were also countless jewelry and clothes. What? Gladys immediately picked up her phone and opened the group chat. Benjamin and Alyssa also opened the group chat. In the group, Tommy sent a proud voice message, Look, everyone. These are the betrothal gifts sent for my sister, Megan. How many assets does this pursuer have to be able to send such expensive gifts? He must have at least hundreds of billions to send such generous gifts. Doesn't it make you guys envious? Gladys frowned and murmured after seeing the gifts and Tommy's proud voice. When did Megan meet such a rich man? The betrothal gift is really expensive and almost worth half of the Callahans' assets. Mom, this can't be right. Tommy sensed that something was not right and immediately said, How could Megan possibly know any rich men? The betrothal gift must be for Thea by Mr. Watson. Didn't Mr. Watson say their family tradition is to send gifts at least worth $1 billion? He just mentioned it in the afternoon and already sent them over so soon. Gladys slammed her tights and said, That's right. Why didn't I think of it? This must be a betrothal gift by Mr. Watson to Thea. How could it be for Megan? That's nonsense. Let's go. We must go to the villa and claim what belongs to us. Let's go, Mom. David stood up. Gladys glanced at Benjamin, still sitting idly, and she called out, What are you doing, Benjamin? Hurry up. Oh. Benjamin finally reacted. The family set off and walked in the direction of the Callahans' villa. James returned home. However, the family was not at home, and he did not bring his keys when he left. He was not in the Callahans' family group chat, so he did not know they were headed to the Callahans' villa. He phoned Thea. Thea had gone to Longevity Pharmaceuticals and asked Una for some orders. She was on her way home after checking the messages in the group chat. A mysterious Mr. Caden. Luxurious betrothal gifts. Thea was taken aback after seeing the gifts Tommy had posted in the family group chat. It made her think of someone for some reason. The ghost-masked man. Suddenly, her phone rang. She recollected herself and answered the phone. What's wrong, darling? Thea, where are you? There's no one at home, and I didn't bring my keys, so I am stuck outside right now. Ads by Pub Future. I'll be home in half an hour. Okay. James hung up the phone. Then, he waited at the door. Half an hour passed by quickly, and a beautiful, fairy-like woman dressed in a casual dress appeared at the house door. James, who was squatting by the door, immediately stood up and smiled. Honey. Thea took out her keys and opened the door. After entering the house, she quietly took out a small box and handed it to James. She blushed and whispered, "Hide it properly. It's for tonight." James trembled with excitement when he saw the thing Thea handed him. Thea said, "By the way, I heard someone sent valuable betrothal gifts to the Clahans villa today. My parents already went to check it out. Let's go have a look too." "Okay." James smiled. The betrothal gifts were from him to Thea. It was time to bring them home. There were already dozens of people gathered in the house when the two arrived at the Clahans villa. Almost all the core members and some close relatives of the Callahans had arrived. There were many boxes in the living room. Some were full of cash, jewelry, and expensive clothing. Nonsense. These are obviously gifts sent to my family by Mr. Watson. James and Thea heard Gladys' shouts as soon as they entered the house. She stood in the living room with her hands on her hips as she shouted at Tommy, who said these were for Megan. Megan's boyfriend is Colson from the Oswalds. Although they had some money, they weren't capable of such valuable gifts. Haven't you guys heard of the Watsons? They are a very low-profile family. Xavier Watson had visited us at noon and given us gifts worth millions of dollars. Look at this. It's what my brother-in-law, Xavier, gave me. David took out his car keys and said boastfully. Tommy instantly lost his confidence after seeing them. Megan stood up and defensively said, "The person who delivered the betrothal gift said that it was Mr. Caden, not Mr. Watson. Who sent it? Does Thea know a rich Mr. Caden? Yeah. Could it be that this Mr. Caden is your live-in son-in-law James?" Tommy opened his mouth and shouted. "Haha. Don't make me laugh. How could it be James? He has no money and no power. I heard he even had to ask Thea for cigarette money." Many people laughed after hearing James being mentioned. Thea and James happened to hear them when entering the house. Thea's expression did not look very pleased. "These are gifts for Thea." James pulled Thea over and announced. Seeing James and Thea walk in together, Gladys immediately pulled Thea to her side and scolded her. "You're trash, James. What are you doing here? I already told you that you're not worthy of Thea. You will get a divorce tomorrow." "Mom," Thea helplessly said, "I'm the Mr. Caden that sent the betrothal gifts." "Therefore Thea," James stepped forward and said. Don't spout nonsense," Thea pulled James and whispered. Lex, who was sitting on the sofa, raised his eyes and glanced at James. "Are you really the one who sent them?" James nodded. "Of course. Lies. How could you have so much money?" Tommy shouted. "Stop being so shameless, James. Just because your surname is Caden doesn't mean it's from you." Gladys also scolded him. "That's right. The other party never stated who it was for. Plus, Thea is already married, so it's impossible to be for her." "This Mr. Caden must be interested in me," said Megan. Lex was incredibly uncertain who the gifts were from. The delivery person did not say who it was for and only said it was from a Mr. Caden. "Thea, do you know of any rich man that goes by Mr. Caden?" Lex glanced at Thea and asked. I do." Thea was stunned for a moment, then nodded lightly. Many people turned to Thea after hearing her reply. Who is this man?" Lex stood up and asked excitedly. James glanced at James and hesitated. She did not know whether she should say it or not. She was worried that James would be angry if she did. "Speak now," Lex shouted. "Darling, tell them." James glanced at Thea and said. "Ads by Pub Future." Thea nodded and said, "The man I rescued 10 years ago was from the Cadence, but I don't know his full name." "Ah, I remember." John's voice suddenly sounded in the living room. Everyone turned to him. "I heard the Megatron group that had been shut down was reopened and taken over by a mysterious person. At the same time, countless companies under 3 of the Great 4 had been given up. These companies belonged to the Cadence 10 years ago," said John. Everyone was shocked to hear the news. I also heard about this. After the Cadence demise, the Great Four took over the Cadence family business. Now that they've given up the companies, wouldn't that mean someone from the Cadence has returned? Didn't he get shot? The execution must have been fake. I heard the person Thea saved had an amazing background. The Blight King was forced to put on a show because of the widespread discussion. Thus, he probably used a death row prisoner instead. Could it really be a betrothal gift from the Cadence survivor that Thea saved 10 years ago? Does he want to marry Thea? The Callahans began to speculate. What? Is he really alive? Thea exclaimed. John shook his head. I don't know. I only heard the rumors. Plus, I heard that someone took over part of the Great Force companies and established a new corporation, seemingly called Majestic Corporation. It should be on the news by tomorrow. James was speechless after hearing their speculations. These betrothal gifts were from him. How did it end up being the person Thea saved 10 years ago? The person Thea saved was him. It's really from me. Shut up. Although your surname is Caden, you're not from the influential Cadence. Are you rich? Darling, don't say too much, Thea pulled James and said. James sighed deeply. How did it end up like this? They were really from him, so how come no one believed him? Do I really have to reveal my identity? No one even believed that I was the sender of the gifts. They'll probably kick me out if I say I'm the Black Dragon and the owner of Transgenerational New City. I already told them in the afternoon, but no one took it seriously. After thinking about it, he chose to remain silent. That Mr. Caden that they were discussing was also him anyway. Let them misunderstand all they want. No matter who sent it, I can't accept this betrothal gift. I've already had a husband, Thea said. However, she lacked a little bit of determination for some reason. She was slightly looking forward to meeting this mysterious Mr. Caden. She wanted to see the person she had saved 10 years ago. She wanted to meet the ghost masked man who rescued her from Trent. James caught on to Thea's expression. He frowned and muttered in his heart, could it be that Thea is really in love with me as the ghost masked man? Dad, are you sure the gifts were sent by Mr. Caden and not Mr. Watson? Gladys asked again. She still felt that it was Xavier who had sent the betrothal gifts and not the one whom Thea had saved 10 years ago. Lex smoked his tobacco and nodded. Yes, it was indeed Mr. Caden. It seems it must be that man from the Cadence that Thea had saved 10 years ago. These gifts are for Thea. I can't accept them, Thea hurriedly rejected. Of course, we're going to keep them. Why not? David stood up immediately and picked up the limited Fira sports car keys inside the gift box. It doesn't matter whether it's Mr. Caden or Mr. Watson who sent it. It belongs to our family if it's for Thea, said David. What are you doing? Put it down. We haven't figured it out yet. How could it be for Thea? It's surely for Megan. Tommy reprimanded. Nonsense. It's for Thea. We're going to take them with us. Gladys shouted. You're the one who is spouting nonsense. Who doesn't know that Thea is married? Who would be so stupid to send such luxurious betrothal gifts to her? Megan stood up abruptly. The family began to quarrel again about the betrothal gifts. James had a headache looking at them. How big of a deal is this? Is it necessary for them to fight this much? He turned around and walked out of the house. Thea's face was pale, and she knew that James was angry. She wanted to chase after him but did not in the end. Ads by Pub Future. James lit a cigarette outside the door and took out his phone to call Newton. Mr. Caden. Mr. Quinn, there's something I need to trouble you with. Go ahead, Mr. Caden. It's like this. James explained the situation at the Callahans. I need you to come over and tell them that the betrothal gift was given to Thea by Mr. Caden. All right, I'll come right away. James hung up the phone. He was left with no choice. Initially, he simply wanted to send Thea some gifts to make her happy. He never expected such a troublesome situation to arise. On top of that, Mr. Caden from 10 years ago was brought up. He had no choice but to let them continue to misunderstand. He was simply repaying his gratitude, so as long as Thea was happy, it did not matter who it was from. He could explain his identity to her when the time was right if Thea liked the other him. James smoked a cigarette outside before entering the house. The house was still very noisy. Gladys insisted that the gifts belonged to her family, so they wanted to take them away. Tommy, Megan, and Jolie kept claiming it belonged to theirs and wanted to keep it. The family kept arguing. Lex was uncertain about the situation, so he simply sat on the sofa and smoked his tobacco, seemingly deep in thought. Thea rushed to James and took his hand. Then, she explained apologetically, "Darling, where did you go? I really don't know this Mr. Caden. The gifts are probably for Megan from some rich young man interested in her, and not for me." James said with a smile, "It's a little stuffy here. I just went out for a walk." He really wanted to tell Thea everything. However, things had strayed from his original intention. He wanted to repay her for saving his life. Initially, he never wanted to reveal his identity and simply wanted to silently stay by her side to protect her for the rest of her life. He would never have submitted his resignation letter when he left the Southern Plains if he wanted to approach Thea as the Black Dragon. Now, he was still investigating the mysterious force involved with his family. There were the Ancient Four. There was also the matter with the family's mysterious treasure map, the moonlit flowers on Cliffside's edge. He had no idea how strong the Ancient Four were, but he knew that one of the 5 commanders was a member of the Ancient Four. It would be really troublesome if he was an enemy. Therefore, he could not reveal his identity. He could not get Thea involved. This was not too bad either. "Honey, you have to believe me. I believe you." James looked Thea in the eye and said, "It's my honor to have married you. Whatever the outcome is, I won't blame you." Sigh. Thea sighed deeply. Soon, Newton arrived. He arrived at the Callahan residence in just half an hour. Knock, knock, knock. Just as they were in a heated argument, knocks sounded from the other side of the door. A Callahan answered the door. Newton entered alongside Serena. Upon seeing the visitors, Lex immediately stood up without much thought. The rest of the Callahans followed suit. With a puzzled look, Lex walked toward them with his cane. Who are you? Ads by Pub Future. Newton was unrecognizable. Wearing a black suit, he exuded an air of elegance. On the other hand, Serena was glamorous in her attire. They saw James. However, following James' instructions, they said nothing. Newton spoke, "I'm from Majestic Corporation." Upon hearing this, their hearts skipped a beat. They had just been discussing Majestic Corporation, and now someone from there stood at their door. Lex invited them to sit. After taking his seat, Newton spoke, "I'm here on behalf of our chairman. The person who sent the gift made a blunder. Though the chairman instructed him to send it to Thea's residence, he sent it to the Clahans' villa." He pointed at the betrothal gifts in the living room and said, "These are the betrothal gifts our chairman wishes to give Thea." Upon hearing this, Thea quivered. She approached him and asked, "Is your chairman a Caden? Is he the Caden from 10 years ago? The one I saved from the fire?" Newton nodded with a smile. "Yes, it's him. What's his name?" Thea stammered. Newton smiled and glanced at James. He remained silent. I would like to meet him." At that moment, Thea could feel her heart thumping. She knew of this man. Yet, she did not know his name. She had been dreaming all this while. She kept having dreams of the one she saved. She desperately wanted to know his identity. Thea's behavior did not go unnoticed by James. He knew Thea had fallen in love with his other identity. Otherwise, she would not have lost control of her emotions. Thea treated him with respect throughout their entire marriage. However, they lacked passion and love. She showed affection, not love. Phew. James took a deep breath. Newton laughed. "You'll meet him soon. He's announced he'll hold a romantic wedding ceremony and promised he'll make you the most blissful woman in all of Kensington. Newton did not say anything else. After saying those words, he stood up and turned to leave. After Newton had left, Gladys burst into a peal of laughter. I told you these were for Thea. How could Meghan have received such a huge blessing? Haha, my luxury car. My villa. David cackled. Meanwhile, Howard and his family wore surly expressions. They remained silent. Knock, knock, knock. Knocks sounded from the door once again immediately after Newton's departure. The door opened, and a few policemen walked in. They were headed by Wyatt Jeremiah from the Organized Crime Division. Wyatt presented an arrest warrant and shouted, Howard and Tommy Callahan, you are under suspicion of committing a professional crime. Please come with us to assist in the investigation. With the cops at the doorstep, Howard and Tommy freaked out. Lex stepped forward and glanced at Wyatt. As the patriarch of the Callahans, he had heard of him. Mr. Jeremiah, could this be a misunderstanding? How could they have committed a professional crime? What have they done? Wyatt glanced at James. James took a step forward and said, it was me who reported them to the authorities. You. They fixed their gaze on James. Tommy burst into a fit of rage. James, you piece of trash. You've been leeching off the Callahans since the beginning. How dare you call the cops on me? And on what charges? Just what did I do? Howard said coldly, this isn't over until you give me an explanation. Thea pulled at James and questioned, James, what are you doing? Everyone stared coldly at James, their gaze filled with hatred. What was he thinking, calling the cops? Ads by Pub Future. James turned to face them and replied coldly, I trust Thea. She wouldn't do anything that brought shame to the family. I knew someone must have framed her, but I didn't know who. So, I reported the matter to the authorities. They arrested Yosef, and he confessed to everything. As he spoke, he looked at Howard and Tommy. Little did I know, it was the both of you who'd been plotting against Thea all this while. You. Tommy took a few steps back and collapsed on the sofa. Howard's face was as white as a sheet. Lex looked at Wyatt and said, Mr. Jeremiah, could this be a misunderstanding? This is simply concerning a family's internal affairs. How could it constitute a commercial crime? Wyatt paid no heed to Lex and said coldly, since someone's reported the case to us, it's our responsibility to get to the bottom of it. Yosef has confessed to everything. First, Tommy gave him $100,000 to deliver substandard and expired medicine to Eternality Hospital. Then, Howard gave him $1 million and instructed him to frame Thea. If you have anything to say, do it at the police station. Seize them. A few policemen stepped forth and pulled out handcuffs. They forcefully handcuffed Howard and Tommy. Wearing a grim expression, Howard remained silent. Meanwhile, Tommy cried out, Grandpa, save me. I don't want to go to prison. Under the gaze of the Callahans, Howard and Tommy were taken away. David recollected his senses only after the policeman had left. He secretly gave James a thumbs up. Smash! Lex slammed his cane on the table angrily and roared, What have you done, James? This is our family's personal business. If they've done wrong, report it to me. Why did you call the cops? Do you know what's going to happen now? Lex was enraged. The Callahans watched helplessly. No one dared speak up. James said calmly, and at doing that work. I brought Yosef here to explain things, but he refused to tell the truth. You didn't trust Thea at all. How can I prove her innocence without calling the cops? Besides, I went to the authorities without knowing that the true masterminds were Howard and his family. Now that the truth is out, we should acknowledge that they've wronged Thea. You little. Lex's complexion turned pale with anger. Besides, James continued, Thea's no longer the chairman of Eternality. She's the chairman of Pacific Group and owns 90% of its shares. This afternoon, she'd just taken over the company from Trevor through a loan. Cough. Upon hearing this, Lex coughed up blood. Then, He fainted. Seeing this, the Callahans freaked out and swiftly made their way to his side. James, what are you doing? Thea rebuked him with an indignant look on her face. How could you call the cops? This was a family matter. Why did you report it to the authorities without consulting me? After rebuking James, she quickly made her way to Lex. Lex had passed out from rage. Soon, he regained consciousness. He sat on the sofa, panting, "You think you're so smart and all grown up now, Thea? Do you not care about the family rules anymore? If that's the case, I have nothing to say. Leave. From this day onward, you're no longer part of the Callahans." "Grandpa." Disoriented, Thea said, "Although I've taken over Pacific Group and am no longer the chairman of Eternality, I'll ensure the contracts signed between Eternality and other corporations remain. Eternality will continue to receive orders from them in the future." "Forget it." Lex lightly waved. "Lex, you can't just ignore this," Jolie cried out, weeping. "Howard and Tommy have been taken by the police. Even if they did something wrong, how could James call the cops? This is a family affair, after all." "A family affair," James said coldly, "is framing Thea considered a family affair? Fortunately, nothing serious happened. Would you still call it a family affair if people had died?" "You." Her face livid, Jolie pointed at James and rebuked him. "Who do you think you are? This is the Callahan residence. What makes you think you have the right to speak?" "That's right. You pushed it too far. How could you call the cops? Why can't you just sit down and talk this through? It's nothing serious, after all. Now that the police have arrested them, what should we do if word gets out?" "Damn you, James." The Callahans reprimanded James and Thea, blaming everything on them. Though David was delighted, he believed James had crossed the line. It was a family affair, after all. Getting the authorities involved would only make matters worse. Thea pulled at James and whispered, "James, withdraw the case. If word gets out, things won't look good for the Callahans. Besides, I'm perfectly fine now. Why don't we reconcile with them?" Thea was grateful James had stood up for her. Ads by Pub Future. However, at the end of the day, the people arrested were still her relatives. James replied, "The relevant authorities have begun investigating the matter. It's too late to withdraw the case now. Besides, if they're proven to be innocent, they'll be released in no time. If they're found guilty, however, it's only natural for justice to be served." James did not plan to let them off the hook that easily. Doing so would only give them allowance to execute worse plots in the future. "Leave, now. I don't want to see your faces." Lex pointed at the door. Gladys took the hint and looked at David and Benjamin. "What are you standing there for? Hurry. Get those betrothal gifts out of here." "Got it." The two came to their senses and quickly obeyed her orders. Gladys looked at James and scolded, "James, don't just stand there. Help them out." "Oh." James nodded and headed toward the gifts. He closed one of the boxes, carried it on his shoulder, and walked out. Meanwhile, the rest of the Callahans looked at them with grim expressions. As the gifts were numerous, they took some time carrying them home. At the Callahans' villa, John asked, "What should we do now, Father? Eternality is expanding its business, while Howard's been arrested. Meanwhile, Thea has taken over Pacific Group. We desperately need someone to take the lead." "John, I'll leave the company's business to you for now." "Yes." John nodded. After all these years, it was finally his turn to call the shots. "Megan." Lex turned to look at her. "The Oswalds have broad connections. Ask them if they can bail Howard and Tommy out of prison. I'll call Coulson this instant and have him come over." The Callahans were all busy trying to handle Howard's and Tommy's arrest. Meanwhile, Thea's family was smiling from ear to ear. They formed a circle around the betrothal gifts, which were worth a fortune. "Thea, isn't this limited edition Ferrari the one we saw during the auto show? I'll give you my Maserati. In exchange, this Ferrari will be mine. By the way, Mom, we should move into a new villa that's at least 1,000 square meters. Hehe. Owning a villa at Goodview Villa District is a sure sign of power and wealth. David was smiling from ear to ear. Thea disagreed with him. We can't accept this. I'm returning them. Smack. Gladys smacked her head and scolded, Are you dumb? This is free. Thea could not retort. She did not know what to say. She pulled James into her room. Meanwhile, the others formed a circle around the betrothal gifts. Alyssa took a beautiful dress and some expensive-looking jewelry and dashed excitedly into her room. She changed her clothes and put on earrings, a necklace, and a ring. Darling, do I look pretty? She came out of the room and walked around the living room. David exclaimed, Wow, you look gorgeous, darling. The dress suits you perfectly. Upon hearing this, Alyssa was flattered. Meanwhile, Gladys wore a worried expression. She muttered, Mr. Watson is rich, but so is Mr. Caden. Who should Thea marry? She should marry both. David blurted out. Smack. Gladys smacked him on his head. He instantly shut his mouth and headed toward a box full of cash. Mom, can I have this? Gladys glanced at him. No way. They'll be kept in safe custody. I'll be putting them in the bank tomorrow. Ads by Pub Future. In her room, Thea was exasperated. I'll go to Majestic Corporation tomorrow to return the gifts to Mr. Caden. James said with a smile, Darling, it's yours now. You should keep it. How could I do such a thing? I already have a husband. Hearing this, James fell silent. Neither of them said anything else. The atmosphere in the room was unusual. James and Thea waited in the room for the rest of the family to fall asleep. Thea went to shower. Meanwhile, James had a box in his hands. His heart was thumping. Soon, Thea came out of the shower. She was wrapped in a towel, which covered her sensitive parts. Her fair skin and her plump, juicy thighs were revealed. Her skin was still wet and glistening with drops of water. She pointed to the bathroom, her cheeks red. Go and take a shower. Oh, adrenaline pumped through James' veins, and he hastily dashed toward the bathroom. He finished showering in 5 minutes. Putting on his pants, he got out of the bathroom. Thea was already lying in bed, the towel by her side. The blanket covered her body. Only her face was revealed. Her cheeks were as red as an apple, and they looked enticing. She moved a little to make space for James. James leaped onto the bed in excitement. Thea quivered the moment he got onto the bed. She knew what would happen next. She thought she had prepared herself. She would finally belong to James, and they would officially be husband and wife. However, the moment James got onto the bed, she became hesitant. She became fearful. It was a fear of the unknown, and a fear of marriage. James turned his body and looked at Thea. Her cheeks were red, and she was irresistible. He extended his arms to embrace her. Then, he went for a kiss. Their lips touched. It felt chilly and a little sweet. And no. Thea pushed James away forcefully. She got up, panting. I am not ready for this. Darling, see, can we do this some other time? She dared not lift her head to meet his gaze. James was at a loss. What was going on? Did she not agree to it? Why did she change her mind? He momentarily froze. Then, he quickly recollected himself and smiled. It's all right. As he said that, he got off the bed and spread the mattress on the floor. Thea did not understand what had gotten into her. She felt terrified the moment James kissed her. However, she did not know what she was afraid of. Why, you can sleep here if you want. Although she did not feel ready, she still could not bear to see James sleeping on the floor any longer. James said with a smile, It's all right. I can sleep on the floor. I'll sleep next to you when you're fully ready. James did not want to pressure Thea into it. In fact, he did not have the right. After all, he would not even be here without Thea. That was why he had decided to support and obey any decision she made. From Thea's perspective, however, James was mad. Quote. She opened her mouth to speak. However, she was at a loss for words. The night passed silently. Ads by Pub Future. Thea did not get a wink of sleep. Meanwhile, James slept soundly. Soon, morning came. Thea rubbed her eyes. She was awake the whole night. Thus, she was a little absent-minded. She saw that James was awake. He put the mattress away, walked out of the room, and lit a cigarette on the balcony. Through the window, she stared at James' back, her mind in a trance. Then, she rose, got dressed, and headed toward the balcony. She called out, "Darling." "Huh?" James turned and saw Thea approaching him. Thea wore an apologetic look. "Sorry about last night. It's no big deal." James laughed out loud. "We got married before building the foundation this relationship needs. It's only natural for you to be reluctant to do such a thing with me. Gradually, and with time, I know you'll accept me." Even with James' reassurance, Thea still felt guilty. James had been through hardships and ordeals ever since he married into the Callahans. Though he was aggrieved, she could do nothing. Sigh. Reflecting on this, she sighed. "What's with you sighing? It's fine. I don't blame you." James stood up and embraced Thea. He said, "I'll never force you into doing anything you don't want to do. Not in the past, not in the present, and never in the future." The more courteous James was, the more guilty Thea felt. "I'll go to Majestic Corporation today and see if I can meet Mr. Caden. I'll explain things to him and return the betrothal gifts." "Fine by me." James nodded. Thea looked at him and said, "Gee, give me some time." He smiled. "I told you I'm fine. Let's get going, honey." James pulled Thea back to her room and into the living room. Gladys, Benjamin, and the others were already there. They gathered to discuss their visit to Goodview Villa district. They wanted to have a glimpse of the villa Mr. Caden had gifted them. After that, they planned on heading to the bank to deposit their money. Thea approached them and said, "I told you I'm not accepting these gifts. I'm returning them." Discontented, David shouted, "Are you dumb, Thea? Why would you return these gifts? They're worth more than 100 million. Gladys was disgruntled. "What are you talking about, Thea? Listen up, now. You have to choose between Mr. Caden and Mr. Watson. You can return these gifts if you want to go on a date with Mr. Watson. If you aren't interested in Mr. Watson, Mr. Grayson's a good pick too. I won't waste my time convincing you. I'm heading to Majestic Corporation now to explain things to Mr. Caden." Thea stormed out of the house. James glanced at them and said with a smile, "Feel free to keep them. I'll have a word with Thea." "HMPH, at least you're not stupid," Gladys grunted. David chimed in, "Say no more, James. Just get the divorce so Thea can find another man. With her glamorous looks, she'll have no problem getting a rich guy. I'll go find her." James turned to leave. However, he did not go after Thea. Since Thea was headed to Majestic Corporation, he had to hurry there to meet her as Mr. Caden. "Since she doesn't like the current me, I'll make her fall in love with the other me." After leaving the Callahan residence, James called a taxi and headed to Majestic Corporation. On the way, he called Newton. "Mr. Quinn, who's currently in charge of Majestic Corporation?" "That'll be me, James." "Got it. Prepare a suit and a mask for me. I'll be there soon." Though Newton did not know what James was up to, he obeyed. "All right. I'll make the necessary arrangements." After the call, James closed his eyes to rest. Soon, he arrived at Majestic Corporation. It was an 18-story skyscraper. Though it used to be a business under the Great Four, it had been returned to its original owner. After Newton took over, he renamed it the Majestic Tower. It was also the headquarters of Majestic Corporation. Majestic Corporation had only been established yesterday. Although there were rumors about its opening, the company had not officially announced its opening ceremony, nor had it held a press conference. However, news about Majestic Corporation's hiring activities had appeared on the online job market. From vice chairman to an ordinary clerk, all positions were open and available. Majestic Corporation had gone on the offensive by offering high salaries to talents. Many unemployed individuals were emboldened and wanted to try their luck. Ads by Pub Future. Even those who were already employed were attracted by Majestic Corporation's remuneration and wished to jump ship. Outside Majestic Corporation, a Lamborghini flawlessly reverse parked into the garage. The door opened. A tall, slender, and beautiful woman in a red dress got off the car. She pulled out a pair of sunglasses and put them on. Her appearance attracted a crowd. At the same time, Tia was outside Majestic Tower. Looking at the 18-story high skyscraper, she felt disoriented. She was a little nervous. Soon, she would meet the person she saved 10 years ago. Soon, she would meet the ghost masked men who had saved her from Trent Xavier. Thoughts filled her mind. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of boots kept ringing in her head. The hideous ghost mask sprang into her mind. Recollecting herself, she took a deep breath and walked toward Majestic Tower. The woman in the red dress was there too. She arrived at the door at the same time as Tia. They noticed each other, and their gazes met. The woman in the red dress looked at Tia and removed her sunglasses. Tia, is that you? Why you are? Tia looked at the slender woman in the red dress. She had curly red hair and wore lipstick. For a moment, Tia could not recognize her. I'm Quincy Zyler. Quincy, Tia exclaimed. Quincy was her classmate at senior high. She was also her best friend. After the incident, Quincy transferred schools. Tia heard she went overseas to study. She did not expect to run into her here. Quincy stepped forward and pulled Tia's arm. A smile flashed across her beautiful face. What a coincidence. Come, let's find somewhere to sit and have a chat. Sure. Tia was excited. It had been 10 years. They found a table at a coffee shop near Majestic Corporation. Tia, I just got back, and I heard about what you went through. I didn't know you'd been suffering all these years. Thank goodness you're strong enough to withstand those hardships. Enough about me. Say, where have you been for the past 10 years? Sigh. Quincy sighed. Back then, something happened to my boyfriend's family. I was devastated and moved to Melpolis with my family. I just came back. Coincidentally, I heard a member of the Cadence had survived and even managed to take back the former businesses of his family from the Great Four. I thought about it and decided to see what it was all about. I also applied for the vice president position while at it. Quincy looked at Tia. By the way, I heard you got badly burnt while you were saving a Caden from the Caden residence. Yes, Tia nodded. Who was it? Drinking her coffee, she looked at Tia. Tia shook her head and said, I don't know. He was on fire when I saved him. The situation was dire, and I pulled him out of the fire without having a clear glimpse of his face. Did he not look for you? He, wearing a flustered look, she contemplated and said, I guess he did. However, he was wearing a ghost mask. So, I couldn't see his face. I came here today to find him and explain things to him. I see. By the way, why didn't you tell me your boyfriend from 10 years ago was a Caden? Hearing this, Quincy sighed. We were only dating for a few months. We planned to announce our relationship after graduating senior high. However, I didn't expect such a disaster to fall upon the Cadens before graduation. Sigh. Tia was curious. What's his name? Ads by Pub Future. James. Tia froze. Oh, I remember now. Quincy caught on. I heard the Callahans found you a new husband. He's called James, too, isn't he? What a coincidence. Yes, indeed. Tia recollected herself. As James Caden was a common name in Kensington, it was not surprising for two people to have the exact same name. They conversed in the coffee shop, recounting their past events. Oh, yeah. Tia glanced at Quincy. She opened her mouth, then closed it without saying anything. After deliberation, she spoke. Yesterday, a mysterious Caden sent betrothal gifts to the Callahans, saying they were meant for me. I'm here today to explain to him that I have a husband and would like him to take back the gifts. Oh, Quincy's curiosity was piqued. She asked with a smile, he should be the one you saved 10 years ago. Did he tell you his name? Thea shook her head. No, I only know he's a Caden and the chairman of Majestic Corporation. Quincy laughed. Not surprising. It's only natural that he wants to marry you since you saved him 10 years ago. But, I'm already married, and my husband's really nice to me. I have no plans to divorce him. Thea shook her head. I hope James is the one you saved 10 years ago. Quincy sighed. James was her first love. She had not entered into another relationship all these years. She just could not forget the romance of her youth. Whenever James' name was brought up, she would have a false impression that he was still alive. She glanced at Thea. Thea, could it be that the person you saved 10 years ago is your husband, James? Could he be a member of the Cadence? How could that be possible? Thea immediately dismissed the idea. She knew her husband very well. How could he be the mysterious Caden? Although James was rich, he got his money through illegal means. He had also been dismissed from the military. Having $200 million was completely different from having tens of billions. Besides, she would not believe that her husband was the ghost masked man. If he was, why would he conceal his identity? Quincy said with a smile, I agree. It'd be too much of a coincidence. However, if it turns out to be true, don't blame me for stealing your man. You're still the same after all these years. I say feel free. My husband is a good-for-nothing who stays at home all day. He has no ambition whatsoever. He even asks me for money to buy cigarettes. Alright, now, since we're both here, let's go in together. I'm interested to find out the identity of the man you saved 10 years ago. I wonder if he's my boyfriend, James. Hearing this, Thea grew expectant. She was looking forward to meeting the person she saved 10 years ago. She was looking forward to meeting the ghost-masked men who turned life upside down for the Great Four. In a lavish office on the topmost floor of Majestic Corporation, James had changed into a brand new suit worth millions of dollars. Serena was adjusting his necktie. Wearing the suit, James exuded a completely different aura. He was a house husband just a moment ago. Now, he was a man who succeeded in life. James. After adjusting his necktie, Serena lifted her head and looked at James puzzledly. Why are you concealing your identity? James smiled. He did not explain. He did not know the answer to her question. Perhaps he wanted to live an ordinary life. At that moment, Newton walked in. James, Thea is here alongside a woman called Quincy Zyler, who's here to apply for the position of vice president. She requests to see you. Q. Quincy Zyler. Ads by Pub Future. James froze. A figure sprang into his mind. He had just graduated from high school 10 years ago. He got to know a girl from school. Her name was Quincy, and they were in a relationship for around half a year. Though teenage relationships were awkward, they were the most unforgettable. James scratched his head and muttered, there's no way such a coincidence is possible. Newton asked, James, both of them wish to see you. Since they came together, do you plan to see them together or alone? James contemplated before saying, let Thea in first. Yes. Newton walked out of the office. Serena followed suit. Newton approached the two, who were waiting at a sitting area outside the chairman's office, and smiled. Thea, the chairman has asked for you. Though Quincy was here to apply for the position of vice president, she was also here to see the chairman of Majestic Corporation. She wanted to know if he was her first love. I wish to see the chairman. Quincy, the chairman has only called for Thea, please go for your interview. If you pass, you might be able to meet him. Saying that, he turned to look at Serena and said, Serena, bring Thea to the chairman. Yes. Serena glanced at Thea. She was mesmerized by her beauty. Recollecting herself, she gestured. Follow me. Thea took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. Following Serena's lead, she entered the chairman's office. A clean-limbed man in a white suit stood before the glass windows in the spacious office. He was standing in front of the glass windows, watching the city landscape. "Chairman, Ems, Thea is here." James, who had his back to Serena, waved his hand. "Got it. You may leave." "Understood." Serena turned to leave. Thea stood in the office and stared at the man before her. The man was approximately 1 meter and 80 centimeters in height, short-haired, and was wearing a white suit. She could not see his face. However, looking at him from the back, she imagined he would have a handsome face. At that moment, Thea was a little nervous. "Greetings," she stammered. James turned to face Thea. She could not take her eyes off him. However, in the instant James turned, she was dismayed. She could not see his face as he was wearing a mask. It was not the same ghost mask from before. Instead, it was a silver mask. It covered his face, and only his eyes, nose, mouth, and chin were revealed. James turned and glanced at Thea. He saw the nervousness in her. He gave her a slight smile. "Make yourself at home. Have a seat." Thea recollected herself and took a seat on the sofa of the office. James took the seat opposite her. "Mr. Caden, thank you for everything you've done for me." Thea opened her mouth to speak. Her voice was shaky. Anyone could tell she was nervous. James waved her off. "If not for you, I would have died in the fire 10 years ago. I know you've gone through a lot over the past 10 years. I could never pay back my debts to you." James was speaking the truth. He could never truly repay his debts to Thea. Thea mustered her courage and lifted her head to look at James. Ads by Pub Future. The man before her wore a white, spotless suit and a silver mask. He had a distinctive aura that was unlike any other. It was the aura of a successful man. The vibes he gave off would be suffocating to the ordinary person. She opened and closed her mouth, unable to speak. She wanted to tell him she was married and would like him to take back the betrothal gifts. Yet, James' aura was too strong and irresistible. She was deeply attracted to him. If only he was her husband. A preposterous idea floated into her mind. She shook her head as if to shake off the idea. "See, can I see what you look like beneath the mask?" Thea wanted to see what he really looked like. "Is that important?" James looked at Thea. "Huh." Thea froze. James continued, "I know what you came here for. You want to return the betrothal gifts I sent to the Callahan residence yesterday. Not only are they betrothal gifts, but they're also my token of gratitude to you for saving my life. Since you're married and have no plans of divorcing your husband, take it as a token of gratitude. Furthermore, I promise you this. If you ever need me, just tell me. I'll do whatever it takes to fulfill your wish." As the son-in-law of the Callahans, James could not promise Thea anything. Even if he did, Thea would not have confidence in his words. However, the man before her right now was different. "I can't accept this," Thea hurriedly explained. "Mr. Caden, these gifts are too generous. I can't accept them. Please, take them back. I only have a single request. May I have a look at your face?" Thea still wanted to see what the person, who had saved her and had been helping her in the shadows, looked like. Seeing the look of anticipation on her face, James wanted to fulfill her wish. At that moment, he intended to remove his mask and reveal his identity to her. However, how would he get along with her after removing the mask? After removing the mask and revealing his identity, Thea would only treat him with respect and reverence. There would be no more feelings of love. Reflecting on this, he restrained the urge to do so. He lightly waved. "Now's not the time. When the time is right, you'll find out what I look like. If there's nothing else, please leave. I still have business to attend to." Thea was disappointed. Though she had met him, she did not get to see his face. She stood up and said, "I'll send someone to return the gifts." I told you there's no need for that, James said bluntly. Since you don't intend to divorce your husband, treat them as my token of gratitude instead of betrothal gifts. James' tone was a little harsh, and he was unrelenting. He did not wish to give Thea any chance to say no. Then, I'll accept the gifts with thanks. Thea did not say much. She turned to leave. Phew. Removing the mask, James sighed a breath of relief as she left. His face wore a helpless expression. I only wanted to send her some gifts. I didn't expect things to go so wrong. Great. Now I'll have to get along with her with two identities. James came to Majestic Corporation to meet Thea. After meeting her, he changed into the casual wear he always wore. This is much more comfortable, James muttered. He walked out of the office and took the dedicated lift to the first floor. He walked out of Majestic Tower and stood by the side of the road to call a taxi. Thea walked out of Majestic Corporation, dejected. Although she had met the person she wanted to meet, she did not manage to see his face. However, he exuded a strong aura. His every word and action could sway the thoughts of others. At that moment, she saw James standing by the road. She froze. Ads by Pub Future. Hearing this, James turned. Upon seeing Thea behind him, he scratched his head awkwardly. Thea, you're here as well. Were you following me? Upon seeing James' flustered look, she instantly understood. Her face darkened. James, do you not trust me? Is that why you followed me? James was speechless. Why would he follow her here? However, he did not know how to explain things to her. As James remained silent, Thea was convinced he had been trailing her. You seem like an understanding guy, so I wasn't expecting you to be this petty. You said you trusted me, but your actions contradict your words. Thea was dissatisfied. She glanced at James. His outfit looked like it cost less than $100 altogether. He looked like a commoner, and he had no special abilities whatsoever. She thought about the mysterious Mr. Caden. His attire was worth a fortune. He wore a spotless suit and exuded a strong aura. In comparison, his husband was a pauper. Mr. Caden, on the other hand, was a prince. Honey, I didn't follow you here, James said helplessly. Then, why are you here? James wanted to explain himself, but he did not know how to go about it. There was no way he could tell her he was the mysterious Mr. Caden who had sent her the betrothal gifts. James, I've seen through you. After meeting the mysterious Mr. Caden, Thea could not help but compare them. Now, she believed James was worthless. Perhaps her family was right. They were not a good fit. Thea's apathy stunned James. They had been married for quite some time. Although they had their misunderstandings, Thea had always stood up for him. He knew of his place in her heart. However, at this very moment, he felt he had no place in her heart. Could it be she had fallen in love with the other him and had begun to look down on her husband? The moment Thea spoke those words, she felt she had gone too far. She remembered it was James who had treated her and cared for her. That period was the happiest she had ever been in the past 10 years. Phew.